Professor Ye, thank you so much for taking time off. I know you just arrived to Singapore. Just a couple of questions about your participation in the World City Summit. You are a respected academic and you've researched a lot about Asian cities and planning. Can I ask you to speculate, since you'll be speaking in the session entitled Intensities tomorrow, can you speculate about how high-density cities can become more livable and more sustainable in the long run?
No, I think in Asia, it is difficult for us not go into the high-density cities because of the growing populations. Just take China, for example, right? The present urbanization rate is 50%, and by year 2040 or so, we will have another something like going to 70%, right? And that volume, we are talking about something like 300 million or 200 million. And that size is the total size of the America, right? And given that size, basically the cities have to grow, right? And so Asia itself, we have a lot of limited land. And so we, unfortunately, although we would like to have a development like America, where we have everybody have their own house, own garden, but this is something that we cannot afford, right? And so developing high-density cities is inevitable in Asia.
How do we make high-density cities more livable and more sustainable?
Well, I think we have been already having high-density development for the past 2 or 3 decades already. But I think there's a lot of things that can be improved. Right? For example, like in Hong Kong, or to a certain extent, like in some old parts in Singapore, where the buildings are very close together. And so how do we have a better building form, better urban design, to improve the quality of living? For example, the distance from one building to another building, can it be a little bit some sort of a farther away, and so that you can have a much better ventilations and also feel less crowded. And also in terms of the urban design, can it have more landscaping, have more public open space? So these are some of the things that can able to make this high density living much better.
Can I ask you to speculate on the future of Asian cities vis-a-vis Western cities? How different will Asian cities be from Western cities?
Well, I think the difference will be greater in the future because I think because of the changes in the population dynamics, right? As I mentioned, the Asian urbanizations is growing very fast, right? For example, the whole world, we just only passed the 50% urbanization rate. But most of this growth are not from North America or Europe, are from Asia and also from some developing countries, right? And so if you now go to visit cities in Asia, a lot of places like Singapore, like Shanghai, like Taipei, or Korea, you'll find that this is a major construction site, right? One of the cities, like in China, the total volume of construction can be equivalent to the whole of any country in Europe. Right? In Europe and also in North America, a lot of the cities are basically shrinking because of the populations. The population size actually is also shrinking. And so a lot of the type of urban development in the European cities as well as North American cities will be basically on urban regenerations. How we are going to, or how they are going to repackage the old buildings, the old districts to revitalize their type of economic activities and also their appearance, right? And also how do they deal with the old urban infrastructure. Whereas in Asia, I think a lot of cities are basically building new things, and new subways and new icon buildings, new CBDs. So the type of, when we are talking about building things new, you have a new image. Whereas if you go to Europe, it will be some sort of a repackaging of an old urban setting. So the contrast will be very different in the future.
Are there things that Asian cities can learn, if any, from Western cities and vice versa? You mentioned obviously in the older Asian cities also, they may need to repackage their old neighborhoods as well. And certainly even for the Western cities, maybe there are things that they can learn from Asian cities. What are the things do you think that they can learn from one another?
Well, I think for the Asian cities, one thing that we can learn from European cities or North American cities is the conservation, right? Just like in Hong Kong, unfortunately, in the immediately after the Second World War, we have to tear down a lot of very nice old buildings to make it into new buildings to accommodate economic growth as well as population growth. But now we regret a little bit, right? We regret a lot because a lot of these type of old buildings have a lot of heritage. And so in terms of Hong Kong, in our new urban conservation strategy, basically we are talking about how do we revitalize, regenerate, and also rehabilitate these type of old buildings, not only to only tear them away, but there are certain buildings that we identify, or even a whole neighborhood that we identify, we need to preserve it. I think this is something that we have to learn from Europe, right? Now for I think the Europe itself, I think they probably also have to look into, for example, how they can make the old city core and to be more vibrant. I think the type of development is no longer on having new buildings, but how to make this old existing building to be more functional, to be more attractive, right? And so the total, I think in terms of the operations will be totally different, when we talk about European and Western cities compared to Asian cities.
There's one frontier of cities that is not found in the Western city, and that's the megacity, which is predominantly an Asian and maybe South American phenomena. Any comments about the emergence of these sort of and how do you plan and govern megacities?
Now, when we talk about megacities, we are talking about cities with over 10 million populations, right? And the reason why in Asia we have so many 10 million population cities is mainly because of population growth, right? People like to go to large cities for job opportunities, for all sorts of different reasons. So this is the reason why we have these 10 million population cities. But not only that, I think now in Asia, particularly in China, or to a certain extent in the future maybe in India, you will see this type of so-called megacity regions. Where, for example, like the Pearl River Delta, you have a few large cities that agglomerate together, like the Yangtze River Delta and also the Yellow River Delta, that area, so where you have these type of clusters of major cities. This will not happen in this type of Europe because, first of all, they do not have this type of population pressure. And secondly, is because the city itself, they also have a lot of, type of a linkage, so that they form a certain type of manufacturing as well as business clusters, right? So this mega city region will be very different from these European cities or North American cities. But this whole concept of a mega city region development is now picking up also in America. They can see the advantage of having this type of urban agglomerations. For example, like the US 2050 plan being produced by the regional planning associations, they also talk about identifying 10 mega city regions and then trying to see how they can link it up with infrastructures so as to facilitate the type of linkages within the city, within these mega city regions. But in terms of scale, it cannot be comparable to the mega city region we are now talking about in China or emerging in India.
What are some of the challenges of this sort of mega city region? The transportation links, how do you feed the people who, because if it's such a big area, the food must come in from much further away, the movement and the jobs and all that. So what are the sort of challenges you?
I think the challenge will be how do you provide a good governance structure. For example, like the transport system, like the land use planning system, what type of coordinations, what type of sharing they can have. And there are a lot of conflict going on, a lot of internal competitions going on. How are you going to resolve it? And even people talk about maybe in the future you only have one level of government among this mega city region, right? But I do not see that it will happen. Maybe there will be some sort of a mega city type of governance structure that emerge, like something like a council of government that try to operate and coordinate the type of development. But obviously, in order to eliminate a lot of unnecessary competitions, duplications of efforts, the mega cities need to be much better coordinated.
Okay, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts. I hope that you have a pleasant stay and a productive conference for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.